Hello everybody, it's Mrs. Bennett-Morgenstern, and I'm here to present the first project, which has to do with the two videos that you've been seeing on the stream and on the classwork tab, and that is calligraphy. Why are we doing calligraphy? Calligraphy in the second video that's on the classwork tab is being used to kind of drive the point home that very important documents throughout history are usually handwritten, even though they have a printing press available or some way to make multiple copies. The importance of the document is indicated by the idea that it's written by hand, which makes it even more special. The reason why I chose this is that if you are taking the World Cultures class, you're probably studying like North America, US and Canada, and going into South and Central America next. But this week kind of marks the anniversary of our US Constitution. September 19th is Constitution Day, and that is when the 10 original rights were presented in the Bill of Rights, which became the first 10 amendments in the Constitution of the United States. So pretty important stuff there, very, very important. The example in the video was the Declaration of Independence. And the two questions I had asked were pretty interesting because I knew that Thomas Jefferson wrote the words, like he thought of the ideas and what to say, but it didn't even occur to me that somebody else actually did the writing, like the handwritten words onto the parchment. That is a whole job in and of itself. Calligraphy is still used today. Lots of people still like to study it, as you saw in the video, and it's kind of a very relaxing thing to do. I used to teach it as a class here when I first started teaching at Ansonia High School. So, just to give you a visual on what calligraphy means, calligraphy is the art of decorative writing or beautiful writing. So it's certain ways that you can manipulate the writing tool to make your work fancy or important looking. Calligraphy is not just in the United States, it's all over the world. Some of the most interesting calligraphies come from the Middle East in the form of Arabic, and from, of course, Asia in the form of Chinese or Japanese. Quite the studied art form, those two types of calligraphy. Here I have an example of actual Japanese calligraphy that I got from actual Japanese educators when they visited the school I was working at in Bridgeport. So there's characters. So these are brush strokes created in a 4-quadrant way, just like Chinese is, and each brush stroke and where it's placed forms a word. In our language, we use letters to form words. In this particular language, they use a combination of certain brush strokes. Altogether, this entire picture means honesty. And over here is the student's signature. Okay? On the back of this is another Japanese writing, and this means peace. These were actually done by what we consider junior high students, probably 8th graders in Japan. I also have an example of way back when this was done as a class. This is actually a student from Ansonia High School who's long since graduated. Sorry about that. Getting used to the equipment. I had told you guys in the video that this might happen. This is an example of the Roman italic calligraphy. Okay. Let me just try to straighten this out a little bit. I'm trying to act as normally as possible. That's why I'm not stopping and starting this. Okay, just bear with me. This could happen in the classroom as well. Something could go wrong. Okay, and I don't know why this isn't staying because I've used this for like a year. Okay. A book that I have here is available in the classroom, but you can certainly look up any kind of calligraphy that you want to study online. Okay, this is just one book that I have. And inside the book, we see a lot of examples and the history of calligraphy writing. Some of it's very ancient. I'll get to more about that in a minute when I talk about the project. A couple of terms that I need you to know. When we look at calligraphy, there's a difference between the font that you use on your computer, which is all the fancy lettering that you can choose from the drop-down menu, and a hand. When we're talking about doing writing by hand in a calligraphic style, we call it a hand. And I have no idea why. I've never been able to find out why they call calligraphy hand, except for the fact that it's done by hand. But the same designs can be found as fonts on a computer, okay? When I used to teach this as a class, it was really hard for students to try to learn some of the hands that I was teaching because they're so used to typing and seeing it so perfect on a computer. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Some other vocabulary words that you might need to know for later on when we take an exam is the types of surfaces that we do calligraphy on. One of the very most ancient is papyrus, and that's made from plants. And I actually have some papyrus, and you guys will be doing on a project on that later on, so I'm not going to go into a big explanation. We also obviously use paper to write on, also made from plants, but the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution is actually made on parchment. Parchment and vellum are made from animal skin. So when they slaughter an animal for food, they would often take the skin of calves, which is a cow, or lamb, which is a sheep, the babies, and they would use that for writing surfaces because it is very, very soft, it's very, very special, and it lasts forever. The only problem with vellum and parchment is that if you don't know what you're doing and you don't clean it properly, it can start to rot. The other thing is it's not very absorbent. So the type of ink that you use may not stick very well after a while and it starts to fade. That's why the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence are in a humidity-controlled archive underneath glass. And if any of you ever saw the movie with Nicolas Cage about him stealing the Declaration of Independence to go on a treasure hunt, you know that it's very, very well protected. One of the reasons why it's in a dark room is because the ink is fading so badly. So they know what the Declaration of Independence says, but it's just very difficult to read when you look at the real thing. Okay, calligraphy is all about holding your hands in a certain way. And the thing about holding your hands in a certain way for this project is I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that you can do to make it easier to do the project. The first one is a double pencil, okay? If you take two pencils in your hand and just write your name with two lines, and I'll do my name, and then I'm going to show it to you. you can make some pretty nice lettering that's nice and even. Okay, so by using 2 pencils in my hand, I was able to make block lettering. How you decorate or color this is completely up to you, but we're not just doing our name. I'm going to show you what to do in a minute. This was just to demonstrate the technique. I can also do it with any kind of fancy writing. So when I say I want to do some kind of cursive N, since my name begins with N, okay? So as you research what kind of calligraphy lettering you want to use, okay, you can kind of first practice on a crappy piece of paper, a bad one, nothing that you want to use, like a scrap or a notebook page. Practice first, and then transfer that idea onto a better piece of paper, like the white copy paper I suggested. The project that we're going to do, there's 2 of them, and I need my book back. The first one is an illuminated letter. An illuminated letter is a letter that starts a word on a page, but it's really, really fancy and decorated. When they started doing illuminated letters back about, I don't know, 900 years ago, they did it mainly to relieve boredom, because the priests and monks that were sitting and copying books hour after hour, day after day, like it was their job, were bored. So they started making all these different decorations and little pictures around the very first letter, and made the letter really, really big so they could fit things around it and make it very special on the page. Okay, they started using gold and precious inks that were worth a lot of money. So these pages out of these books that are still in existence are extremely valuable. Number 1, because they were handwritten. Number 2, because some of the paints and gold that was used in them. And the covers are pretty spectacular as well. So an illuminated letter. I have an example of an illuminated letter, and this is a very, very easy one. So you can see it fills up the whole paper. It's really big, but there's nothing else on it. So you only have to do 1 letter. The idea here, though, is to get creative with what's around the letter. I do remember the young lady that did this, and she was a very, very quiet person, and her mother had a big garden in front of their house, so she did flowers. So you might want to think about things that are related to you if you're going to do your own initial. You don't have to. If there's another letter that you find particularly interesting to draw or challenge yourself to, go ahead and use it, okay? So notice that it's really well colored in. It's very, very bright. It's very, very neat. So the student artist was using really good craftsmanship, trying to make this as high school level and artwork as possible. The other way that you can do this project, and this is on a large piece of paper, but you can definitely do it on just the 9x12 or the 8x10 copy paper. And I hope you can see that this is a B. So it's an Old English B. So that's the hand that was used, is Old English or Gothic. And they copied the B over and over and over again, but they did it in different directions. You could use that technique that I showed you earlier to do this if you practiced. Then they used some shading with the color blue and black colored pencil to do all the coloring in. What I like about this is that it, again, pretty much uses the whole paper, and it's fairly simple, okay? The letter itself is a little complicated, but once you get it all drawn in, the coloring should be very entertaining to do. So, once again, this project is gonna due by the due date that will be posted. And during class, especially on a Wednesday, up until that point, you can always ask me a question, and you can always Gmail me a question. Please don't use Google Classroom to ask questions, okay? Because I usually don't see them till like a day and a half later. There's so much on there. Gmail me with a specific question, and I'll usually get right back to you, okay? Please remember that any information that I give you in a presentation, all of the language, all of the specific things that I talked about will be on a study guide. So when it comes times to take the exam at the end of the semester, you will have the information, okay? So you're not gonna be tested on it. This is the project, doing the artwork, okay? That's where the big grade comes from. All right, I don't want to take up any of your more time, so have a good day.